how to calibrate the Cellular Phase blind cutting machine. As we get into this task, it's important for you to understand that as you're visiting your Lowe's stores, you may see different versions of the Phase blind cutting machine. There are small differences in these machines because they have been in the stores for such a long amount of time, and we have manufactured different phases or version of this machine. If you're looking for a reference, please take a look at the product cutting instructions that should be found in all stores, and you can flip to the machine diagram section to notice and look through pictures of what these different phases look like. Before we get into this task, I want you to understand the reasons why you would be calibrating the phase machine. The reasons behind this might be if you've received a call from your store associate and they're claiming that their blinds are being cut off or at a measurement that they did not set the machine to. For example, if you receive a call and your associates have been cutting faux wood blinds and they wanted that blind to come out to 30 inches exact. If that blind is consistently coming off a 1/4 of an inch greater or to 30 1/4 every cut, you may need to come in and move that tape and calibrate the blind cutting machine. You are looking for consistent measurements every time that product is cut. If you receive a call and the associate claims that every time they cut a faux wood blind, there are different measurements that it is off. Maybe the first time they cut it, it's 30. The next time they cut it, it's 30 1/8. The third time they cut it is 30 1/4. If there are inconsistencies in the measurements after cutting, there is a training need in that store or an operator error is occurring. So it's important for you to understand the why behind calibrating the phase blind cutting machine. Next, let's discuss the tools needed when calibrating the Cellular Phase blind cutting machine. First, you will need the calibration and installation instructions. This PowerPoint can be located in your dock locker and will walk you through step by step how to calibrate each tape on the blind cutting machine. Next, you will need the tape scraper. This razor blade will help you remove the tape that is being calibrated. Next, you will need a Sharpie marker to mark the correct location of the tape that you're calibrating. You will also need your replacement tape to use when calibrating the tape and laying it in the correct location. You will need a tape measure to confirm the tape calibration once it has been installed. And last, you will want your product cutting instructions on hand for any questions you may have about the cut process after you have installed the tape. Next, we are going to cover how to calibrate the tape that cuts real wood, faux wood, woven wood shades, and cellular shades. You will want to use your PowerPoint as a reference tool, and the first thing that you're going to do is log into the blind cutting machine. I have already logged into the blind cutting machine, and the steps for logging in can be found in your product cutting instructions. Once you have logged into the machine, you will select the wood icon. Once you've selected that icon, you're ready when lit light will turn on. Next, to ensure accurate calibration, we are going to actually move the blade in the machine into the cut zone. The way you will do that is to press both green start buttons and hold them down for 15 seconds. I have already done this for time purposes, but you will hold it down for 15 seconds to simply move your blade into the cut zone so we can measure from the blade. Next, let's check the blade location so we can ensure to measure our calibration tape accurately. You will want to raise the black hood on the left side of the machine and ensure that your blade has traveled into the cut zone so we can actually measure from the blade. You will next want to lower the black hood on the left side of the machine. Next, you will want to move your center measuring guide to 24 inches outside mount and lock your center measuring guide in place. You will then take your tape measure and slide it underneath the black brush until you locate the blade. From here, you should measure from the blade to the left side of your center measuring guide 11 1/4 inches. Which we have, and that confirms the calibration of your wood, faux wood, woven wood, and cellular shade tape. Let's review again the correct calibration steps for this tape. So we have set our center measuring guide to 24 inches outside mount, and we have verified that our measuring tool measures 11 1/4 inches from the blade to the left side of the center measuring guide. If your tape is fully calibrated, this gives you the opportunity to work with your store associate on the correct steps for cutting blinds. There may be an operator error, and that could be why they're achieving incorrect measurements. If for some reason you do verify the calibration and it is off, you are not achieving that 11 1/4 measurement from the left side of the center measuring guide, you will need to replace your blind cutting machine tape. So let's give an example. If you measure your tape and from the blade, the left side of the tool measures to the right or greater than 11 1/4, you will need to move or replace this tape to the left on the blind cutting machine. If your tape measures less than or to the left of 11 1/4, you will need to shift your tape to the right on your blind cutting machine. So let's walk through that replacement process. To remove the tape during the calibration process, the first thing that you will need to do is slide the center measuring guide down to the right of the machine so it gets out of the way for the removal process. Next, you will take your Sharpie marker and you will make a small mark along the right edge of the current tape to mark the current tape location. This way you understand which way to relay the tape or replace the tape to the left or to the right of that initial or current mark. Next, you will take your tape scraper and gently slide it underneath the edge of the machine tape that you need to remove. From here, you can easily peel up this tape for replacement. Now, I have removed the tape that was miscalibrated. Next, we are going to replace the tape. Prior to replacing the tape, it's important to note that we do have an 1/8 inch tolerance on the level or blind cutting machine. If you measure the center measuring guide and it was 1/8 of an inch too wide or too narrow versus 11 1/4, that's fine. You do not need to replace this tape because that falls within levelor's tolerance. However, if it comes off greater than 1/8 of an inch in either direction, you're going to need to replace your tape or recalibrate this machine. So let's give an example. This line represents where my previous tape was laid. Let's say when I measured my center measuring guide, it came out to 10 1/4 versus the desired width of 11 1/4. That means that my blind was a full inch too close, or the box was too close to the blade by 1 inch. So I need to take my new tape and relay it 1 inch away from the machine. So you're going to move it to the right or away from the blade because it was cutting too much off of that blind. Before we start relaying this new tape, I want to point out the relationship of the tape that you're relaying to a tape measure. You will notice that the tape that you're replacing on the machine is at a half scale to a normal tape measure. That is because we cut both sides or cut the blind 2 times on each side. So this tape is at a half scale. So when I am moving it for a full inch, I only move it to, again, that half scale at a 1/2 of an inch. So you take your tape measure and line up your line that you made to your previous or miscalibrated tape and measure out a 1/2 of an inch. So I'm using the 5 inch mark for an example. So I'm going to place a dot here at the 1/2 inch mark away from my previous measurement. From there, again, you're going to move this tape away from the blade or the machine because it was cutting too much off, and you will peel away the backing of this tape and lay it down exactly at the mark that you've made for your new edge and re-stick the tape. Now that is an example that you would use if your machine was cutting too much off of your blind. Now let's use an inverse example. If I had measured my center measuring guide and instead of 11 1/4, it measured 12 1/4. So it's not cutting enough, or it's cutting it too wide from that blind. So you need to actually then move your tape to the left so it cuts that remainder off of the blind that it's not previously cutting today. It's cutting it far too wide, so you would need to move your tape to the left by that half increment. So again, because we know it's an inch off, I'm going to just use my 11-inch mark here. I'm going to measure in a 1/2 inch and make a small dot. That is going to be the new edge for my replacement tape. And I would move that tape again closer to the blade or to the left of that previous mark, and then re-stick your tape. Let's review the steps to recalibrating the blind cutting machine. We have just calibrated the real wood, faux wood, woven wood shade, and cellular shade tape. Let's review the key things to remember. First of all, the level or phase blind cutting machine does allow 1/8 of an inch as tolerance. So if your associates are concerned that their blinds are being cut off by 1/8 of an inch, too narrow or too great, too wide, that's okay. We do allow that 1/8 of an inch tolerance. Also, if you do check the calibration and that center measuring guide measures off by 1/8 of an inch, again, you do not need to relay this tape. It is within calibration. The next thing I want you to remember is, again, if you measure the calibration on this machine, and we are desiring 11 1/4 inches from the left side of the center measuring guide to the blade. If it measures more narrow or less than 11 1/4 inches, for example, 10 1/4 inches, that means too much is being cut off of that blind. So you need to move this tape to the right or away from the blade. If you measure, again, that center measuring guide to the blade and it's greater than 11 1/4, anything, say, let's say 12 1/4, again, you're not cutting enough off of that blind. So you need to move your tape to the left or towards the blade. So remember those steps, and again, don't forget, this tape is at a 1/2 scale to a normal tape measure. That's because we cut every blind 2 times on each side, so it's at a 1/2 scale. So anytime you are moving the tape either to the right or to the left, you are only moving it at a 1/2 scale to the measurement that it's off. Remember, if you measure that calibration and it's greater by a full inch, you are only going to move the tape a 1/2 inch. Also remember, let's say it's less than by a 1/2 inch where it should sit. You're only going to move the tape by a 1/4 inch. So it's truly at a 1/2 scale, remember that. Once you have recalibrated and replaced your tape, it's always a good best practice to cut an actual cellular shade, for example, to ensure that the machine is cutting properly. So grab a cellular shade and make that cut to ensure that the machine is calibrated accurately. The last reminder I have for you today for this tape is to continue to reference this calibration and installation guide. All of the material that we've covered today can be found here in these calibration and installation instructions that are found on your dock locker.